guys, welcome back to Room 237, and this is for the 1978 Giallo film, The Sister of Ursula. This is the severed release that I think has been out of print. This release came out in 2008, and this is a Giallo film I've wanted to check out ever since I started doing this marathon. Well, this marathon. I'm so used to saying that. Since 5 months ago when I started, and have since stopped the Giallo marathon, but have never really been able to find it. I got this as an early Christmas / birthday present from my girlfriend because I asked for it specifically with the number of Gialli that I've had a hard time finding. But it's one that I've seen pop up a lot on some Giallo Facebook pages, which I can make a whole video about that. I'm probably leaving those pages. I made a post about it, but that's a whole other topic. And just one I've seen pop up a lot, and it's one that I wanted to check out. Now, it came out in the late 70s, which at that time, Polizieschi was still very popular. Giallo was still pretty much dying out. This is the pre-Tenebrae era. Post-Golden Age, pre-Tenebrae. And when Giallo was really the only way to kind of really keep it somewhat sellable was to go straight into hardcore sexploitation, almost, pornographic. So this goes into the same class with, Play Motel, Giallo in Venice. I don't know if it's a Giallo, but there's another movie called Hotel Fear. Slaughter Hotel, even though that's a much earlier one, where it is almost just non-stop sexploitation. And in this case, it's not like an older Giallo where the nudity and sexuality kind of plays into the plot or even the kills. It's just some hardcore sex scenes, or as hardcore as it was allowed, because also censors in Italy were getting much lighter at this time, which is why these films were kind of becoming more racier at that time. So yeah, the sexuality feels a lot more gratuitous. I still have not seen Giallo in Venice, but I have seen and reviewed Play Motel. I ranted on it. This is a much, much better movie than Play Motel. I will give it that. But it has kills kind of reminiscent of What Have You Done to Solange. It does have some familiar faces. Unfortunately, the suspense really isn't there. It tries to be interesting with some supernatural, psychic kind of subplot, which this was post-Fulci Psychic. It's just not as interesting. The red herrings are not as misleading as they probably like to think. And I think all that chalks up to this being the debut film of Enzo Milioni, who was a inexperienced filmmaker at the time. And actually, this got made because his producer, Armando Bertuccioli, made him a bet, because Milioni wanted to make this big film. I can't remember what kind of film, but he had a cast of all the biggest stars he wanted to put into it. No way to fund it. So Bertuccioli said, why don't you make a very cheap thriller so you can kind of pool in some money, put that towards funding. It didn't really make a whole lot of money, and even though he directed 3 other films after this, none of them were that dream project that he had. And like I said before, it does star some familiar faces. Barbara Magnolfi, who people might recognize from Suspiria, Stefania DiMario, who was in Zombie, Fulci's Zombie, and Mark Perel, who was in Fulci's The Psychic and Don't Torture a Duckling, and Yvonne Harlow, who claims to be Jean Harlow's granddaughter, but I think a lot of people have disputed that, and Anna Zinnemann. The story is very simple. I think it tries to mix its sort of the eroticism with the kills and the Giallo aspects. I think it kind of fails for the most part. It definitely takes some of the elements, well, the deaths in this film, it's not all of them, but some of them. I mean, overall, there's 6 deaths. I think 2 or 3 of them have the kind of kills that everyone talks about that's in this. Is very similar to a death that's in Red Rings of Fear, which also kind of goes into the same kind of class as this in Play Motel. Not nearly as sleazy, but still pretty sleazy. And also, the severed cut, I think is known as the sexy edit, but it doesn't, which is uncut, but it doesn't have the unauthorized hardcore inserts from the original release, which is fine because there's plenty of sex, nudity, and bush to go around as is. I think a lot of the stuff in those scenes was, I've read, is unsimulated. There's no real way to tell, at least from what we can see. It's not a boring sit at 95 minutes. You can pretty much tell where it's going to go. It's obvious who they want the red herring to be. It's obvious. It's not super obvious, but it's not super surprising who the killer is. Also, there's all these subplots that I don't really think are necessary. Because the basic story is you have these 2 sisters, Dagmar and Ursula, which Sister of Ursula, I don't think really works as a title. There is an alternate title, or maybe it's the original one, which is The Curse of Ursula, which I think works a lot better, because there really isn't anything spectacular about the Sister of Ursula. She is one of our leads, but she doesn't really feel it. I mean, it's not like Dagmar does a whole lot. Ursula does seem to be the main focus. But there are these 2 sisters whose estranged father had left them a huge inheritance because he had recently died. So they're going around Europe to find their estranged mother to split the inheritance with her. They stop off at this one seaside resort, which is in Amalfi, called the Il Saraceno, but which that hotel was actually under construction at the time of this, but it was never finished. It looks like a nice resort. There are some very well done shots in this. Also, the score, before I get any further, if I can find who did the music, which it doesn't say on here. Oh, it was Mimi Uva. I will say there is something interesting with the score, and that is it's all the same piece of music, just with different tempos and different instruments. That, I think, is very interesting. There's even a song played by Yvonne Harlow, because she plays Stella Shining, the hotel lounge singer. She sings a song in this. And that song is the same piece throughout the whole movie. But most of it just has this very porny kind of bass line through it, and that's pretty much what it sounds like. But when we have like the chase scenes or the real dramatic stuff where you get the synth behind it, It's actually a very well done score. It's very reminiscent of like a Morricone score with like the, I always forget her name, but she's the Morricone collaborator that adds the vocals. Kind of reminiscent of that. But yet most of the music just has that kind of like step above the pornography music. So they stop off at this resort. When they stop there, people start getting killed off. And Ursula claims to have these psychic powers where she can see people are being killed. She thinks she's going to be the next victim. She doesn't believe that her father's really dead. She claims to have seen and spoken to him since they've been there. And then you have all these side characters, like the owners are Vanessa and Roberto, which they have an open marriage. But they're all, she wants a divorce. She has a relationship with a younger woman named Jenny. Roberto, I believe he's having a relationship with Stella, the singer, who is dating Filippo, played by Mark Porral, who is a drug addict. And she doesn't like jealous guys, and that's all he is. He's a junkie and jealous of what Stella's doing. And then you have these other characters, like this one young couple who were there, but their reservations can't be fulfilled. So they end up going to this one area in the resort where they get killed off. And the killer's method is he likes to watch women have sex, then comes out when they're done and kills them with a giant phallus. Yes, and like the first victim is actually, we see from the killer's POV, pays this prostitute to have sex with a guy. The guy leaves. The killer comes out from the curtains. We see from the shadow, it's his giant dick, essentially, and pretty much fucks her to death. Yeah, great movie to talk about with the Christmas tree in the background. Now, and that's like the first sort. And these scenes are long. These sex scenes go on forever. Those kills are more implied than shown. I mean, the young couple that gets killed, they get their own sex scene, but they're killed with some sort of blade, which again is done with kind of choppy editing. Like we kind of see the blade get raised, and then we just like we see their throat slit. It's kind of choppy. But then, you know, Jenny gets killed with the phallus. And whenever the killer's around, whether it's nighttime or bright, shiny daytime, when it shows the killer's eyes, it's shrouded in darkness, so it doesn't really make sense why the killer looks like that. Even when we see what the killer looks like, you know, after it's revealed, there's no like hood or anything. There is like a fedora or a hat, but nothing to create as much shadow that's there. It could be a trick to try to obscure who the killer is, but it also draws attention to the killer's green eyes, and there's really only one character with green eyes, which I'll say when I get into spoilers. That's basically the movie. And then, I mean, I think what most people talk about with this is, okay, yeah, you get some familiar faces like Mark Porral and, you know, Stefania DiMario and Barbara Magnolfi, which Magnolfi does do a good job, but at the same time, she just seems kind of like a angry child. It kind of reminded me of Harrison from Dexter New Blood, because every time Dagmar tries to help her, she just screams, "Don't touch me," and runs off. Also, it seems at times that Filippo is very interested in Dagmar, but that's very intermittent throughout the film. So really, just the long graphic sex scenes and the kills, really all people ever talk about. with this film. There's not a whole lot of atmosphere. There are some great shots, you know, when they're out on the patio, you get to overlook the mountainside and the seaside and everything. That all looks great. But there's not a whole lot of atmosphere, suspense, not a whole lot of tension building. It's not super bloody. I mean, the most bloodiest parts would have to be like when the throats get slit. We do kind of see the aftermath of the phallus kills, which I think on the hooker, we just kind of see some redness down there. With Jenny, it's a little bit more mangled, but it doesn't really show her up close. Also, the scene where Dagmar has some alone time with the gold chain. That's a scene people seem to talk a lot about. But also, it doesn't really come out and say what the motivation of the killer is or why. It kind of hints at it at several points throughout the film, but other than that, there's not really a whole lot to talk about. I guess I'll get into spoilers, but I mean, I'm not disappointed with it, even though I said it's one I wanted to check out for a while. I wasn't expecting, you know, what like a Sergio Martino film. I knew it was going to be along the lines of Play Motel or, you know, the right on the line of pornographic, and that's pretty much the selling point of the film. So the more Giallo aspects are further downplayed. Not super well directed. I knew what I was getting into. I'm glad I checked it out. I'm glad I finally saw it. I wouldn't say it's, you know, for that reason, it's among the worst I've ever seen. Definitely not one of my favorites. And I mean, I don't have anything against right out sleaze. I mean, New York Ripper is one of the sleazier ones as well, but that's fairly stylish for how sleazy it is. I would, again, this is way better than Play Motel. This isn't a rant at all. Can I recommend it? Definitely know how sleazy it is before you get into it. Unless that's something you generally watch anyway. But just know it's probably going to be pretty predictable and there's not a whole lot to write home about. I'm actually finding it kind of difficult to find things to talk about, but with that, I'll get into spoilers. So it's hinted at several points through the film that Ursula suffers from some sort of trauma. Like, you know, her father was impotent, so their famous actress of a mother left their father when they were very young. They got sent to a boarding school. But whenever Ursula was around their father, she adored him. He was a talented musician, and she would just sit there and listen to him play piano for hours. And I don't remember if it says the trauma that she suffered other than the divorce and being shipped off at a young age. But the movie does kind of play with the idea, is their father really dead? Or is he back from the dead? Is she really psychic? Is she just crazy? Well, she's the killer. At least, because that's what I meant earlier when I said it doesn't come out and say the motivations. Because even though there is a part where there is this doctor that says trauma can spark some sort of psychic phenomena in people, I don't know if that's the surefire way of saying, oh yeah, she is psychic and she is channeling her father or his energy or his spirit. If so, that's kind of a weak explanation. I found more in all the exposition is pretty much just feels just as fleeting as the last, but I did get more out of the trauma explanation. I don't know which one it actually is, but so yeah, which goes to show that the phallus is not a real penis. It's this, and everyone calls it a wooden dildo. I don't know if that's what it actually is, but it is something that we see in several shots where it is this phallic looking wooden piece that I thought it was like, because it has like a face with like a sailor's beard. I thought it was like a sailor. It looked like it had like one of those like rain hats that sailors wear that droops down, which kind of looks like the head of the penis. Or like a religious figure or something. Just happens to be in the shape of that. It's in many shots. There's even shots where it's very up close, up by the camera. Then in the background, we'll see the door open. It'll be like Ursula or Dagmar walking in, kind of trying to imply some things. The only other real twist is that Filippo, the drug addict, is actually part of, he's actually a detective working in narcotics. There's a drug ring going on at the hotel that Roberto and Vanessa are somehow involved with, so he's trying to bring them down. And literally, like, barely minutes after we see Ursula as the killer, because she's the only one with green eyes, and again, we see, like, this of the killer when it shows the killer's face, but it's shrouded in shadow, even when the room is brightly lit by daylight. She, like, backs up against a window and falls to her death. So, not much of an explanation after the fact, which kind of goes hand in hand with the rest of the film. I mean, there's not a whole lot to it narratively. It really does seem, it does feel like a movie that was made for, you know, to make money, to do something else, whatever it could have been. In this case, make a bigger movie. But just have all the elements of what you need to sell a movie at that time. Do a cheap thriller. Okay, let's make a Giallo. Oh, sexploitation is bigger than ever. We got more lenient censors. We can make it more hardcore, closer to, you know, to the pornographic as we possibly can. Oh, the Giallo stuff is really being more diminished, and these are becoming more overpowering and overshadowing of those elements. And yeah, so I don't know if it was left ambiguous if Ursula is crazy or if she was, you know, psychic and, you know, psychic / possessed or channeling her father. But, you know, because with the, by saying that their father was impotent and that's why the mother left, could be that's why it has this rage towards women having sex. But I mean, of these ones where just the sexuality and the sleaze is the selling point and the main focus, I will say this was definitely one of the better ones. I mean, again, way better than Play Motel, way better than Slaughter Hotel. I can definitely see why Severin picked this up. It's definitely a Severin release. But I'm also glad to have it as part of my collection. This is the 97th Giallo review that I'm doing. But yeah, just one of those ones that's hard to talk about because there's not a whole lot to say. But yeah, everyone knows this as the wooden dildo movie. The giant wooden dildo movie. Which all movie guide says, delightfully sleazy with one of the more unusual weapons in Giallo cinema. That pretty much sums up what can be taken away from this film. So, again, it's not one I disliked, it's not one I was disappointed by, but it's not one that I was completely blown away by either. But that's 1978's Sister of Ursula. Hopefully for Christmas there'll be some more Gialli for me to do. I am trying to get more Christmas reviews out, but as I said during my Elves review, I just really haven't been feeling Christmas films this year. Kind of burnt myself out a little bit, but I'm going to try to do what I can. So, hope you enjoyed. Continue watching, and stay tuned for the next video.